Yes, it's, I would request all of you just to mute your volume just for 1 minute, so that I can give a formal welcome to all of you, please. Am I audible, Chaudhary sir?
Yes, of course you are. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are also audible, sir. You can mute your volume, sir, just for a minute, sir. Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. On behalf of Professor H.N. Tripathi Foundation, I am Dr. Shemen Tripathi as organizing secretary of this webinar series. I formally welcome all of you to this meet. At the very outset, I welcome both our speakers, Mr. Anup Chaudhary, sir, who has been on my behalf. Sanjay Pathak will be introducing you, and on my behalf, personally, I welcome Professor A.K. Pandey, sir, who is a professor in our Faculty of Law, Banaras Hindu University. He is an expertise in the area of criminal law, labor law, jurisprudence, constitutional law, and many other subjects. And today he is on behalf of the foundation. He has joined us. I welcome you both, Pandey sir and Chaudhary sir. The reason for taking up this topic for today, that's a topic of constitutional morality, is the recent trend of 2, 3, 4 years, which is happening at the governance level and at the level of the judiciary also. I think the audience is very keen to listen on this topic of constitutional morality. Few recent judgments have also come, delivered by former Chief Justice Deepak Mishra ji, Fali S. Nariman ji, Justice Chanchud, and many others. So we are very keen to listen to both our speakers, and Sanjay Pathak will be acting along with me as the moderator of this meet today. So I request Sanjay Pathak to kindly introduce Mr. Chaudhary first, so that we begin our topic of the day, please.
Thank you, Chairmendra Bhai. Good morning to all. I am Sanjay Kumar Pathak, advocate on record of the Supreme Court of India, and it is my pleasure and honor to welcome Mr. Anup Chaudhary, senior advocate, and Professor A.K. Pandey, who is in the capacity of my teacher. I am happy to see him on the screen. So, without taking any further time, I would like to introduce one of the speakers, Mr. Anup Chaudhary. Mr. Chaudhary is a senior advocate of the Supreme Court of India. He is in the profession for more than 54 years, so you can understand his standing. He has been the Advocate General for the state of Madhya Pradesh. He was also Chief Standing Counsel, and he has worked as a special counsel for many states and central government agencies. He is one of those counsels who are upright, who have constitution in their mind, and who are inclined to uphold the rule of law, and who do not succumb to the pressure of politics or power. And one very interesting thing about Mr. Chaudhary is he is perhaps the only advocate in the country who has never ever addressed a judge of High Court or Supreme Court as my lord, because he truly believes that Lord is only one. He is above us all, so the human beings should not be called as my lords. So this is a very rare distinction, and I don't know, when Bar Council of India is asking us not to address the judges as my lord, and judges are taking offense to it. So I don't know how for this long period of 54 years, Mr. Chaudhary has dealt with this position or situation. So Mr. Chaudhary also takes keen interest in the development of junior members of the bar. He has he did not take any time in giving his consent when he came to know that we are organizing something for the teaching community and for the students of BHU and others who have joined this meeting from far corners of our country. So now, may I request Shaimendra Tripathi, sir, to begin the session.
Thank you, Sanjay. Virtually, you've already started the session, so I am formally inviting Chaudhary sir to start with your deliberations, and it's a privilege. And this is something new, amazing fact that you mentioned, Sanjay, to addressing the chair without using the terms which many of the advocates are using it. So it's a privilege that if I can call you my lordship today to start with your presentation, sir. Welcome.
Yes.
You can. I request you to start with your deliberation, sir. Chaudhary, sir.
Yes. Am I not supposed to see myself?
Yes, sir. You are visible, sir, and you are audible, sir.
No, I was not visible to myself. So I was wondering.
Maybe on the most right corner of your screen.
As long as I'm visible to you all, it doesn't matter whether I'm visible to myself or not.
Sanjay, Sanjay will help you how to visit yourself.
Yes. You know, when Sanjay has been extra laudatory in introducing me, but there's one thing I've always kept up is that you address a judge with respect, but not with adulation. And it goes against our ethos. Call somebody Mere Bhagwan, my Lord, wherever we are following this, the English system. You know why? Because the lords were landlords who used to dispense justice. Therefore, I have never addressed a judge as my lord. I've always called them sir, but with respect. And I have never faced any problem in all these 54 years of mine in the profession. I was the Advocate General for Madhya Pradesh in 93, 96. Then, of course, I shifted here to the Supreme Court in my practice. Coming down to this very interesting topic, when Sanjay mentioned about it, that he wants to have a webinar on constitutional morality. This is very, very relevant issue, topic, and subject in the present circumstances as we see. And whatever is going on from one breadth of the country to the other, constitutional morality will always play a very important part. And therefore, it's very, very educative for me also. Once Sanjay sent me he also assisted me in sending me some case laws to read where the Supreme Court applied the principles of constitutional morality. And then I began preparing. I think it's very nice that it was good to hear the topic, but what is this talk about, what's meant by constitutional morality, was also educative for me while preparing. Something, as we say in law, every day is a learning day. Learning process for a lawyer is every day. It is so vast and huge that no lawyer worth his salt can say that he knows the whole law now and indeed not. We leave that, of course, the judges might say that we know all the law, but lawyer will never say that he knows the law. And that's the unfortunate part. The wish the judges would realize that they do not know the entire law and they are also still in a learning process. So those of us who practice often at times, we find that the judges are not relating to us, but then they refuse to relate for the simple reason that they are not prepared to learn law. They think that they know the whole law. Anyone judge who thinks that, of course, that's up to him. But as lawyers, we all adjust to that. Now, what is this constitutional morality? You know, moral word is taken from a Latin word called mos. And that means custom. Then another word comparatively in Greek language is ethos. From that word article has come. combination of both. What is moral, morales, and interestingly, the French call it the moraux. But it is societal behavior pattern which is acceptable to society to distinguish from good and bad, from right and wrong. It's come from time immemorial. And the concept of this morality, when it comes in constitution, it is labeled as constitutional morality. Every constitution where the country is run by a constitution, or even where in the UK, when it is not run, it's on common law principles, and there's no written constitution, but all democracies, please. And I would confine this, you must understand, constitutional morality is a concept of democracy. So those countries which do not believe in democracy cannot profess to have this principle imbibed in them of constitutional morality. Any constitution must have this concept of constitutional morality. Now, in our constitution, very interestingly, the basic tenets of constitutional morality, or I would say morality as understood in the constitution, it begins from the preamble. If we look at the preamble, first is to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, right? Liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. Equality of status and of opportunity. And further, now see, here comes the principle of constitutional morality being brought into practice to promote, to enact, promote them all. Fraternity, assuring the dignity of individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. Therefore, the starting point in our constitution, the constitutional framers were keen to put this concept of morality in its preamble. It is true, of course, according to the principles of constitutional interpretation, it has been held and now it has become no longer res integra, that the constitution, the enacting provisions of the constitution are not controlled by the preamble. Therefore, when you have to interpret a constitutional provision, the assistance from the preamble can be taken as an external aid to the interpretation, only if some guideline is required for the court to understand something which is not specifically provided in the Constitution. And there are some judgments which I'll be showing later on, but then the very first judgment is, if you remember, the LCT of Delhi versus the Lieutenant Governor, a huge fight as to what is the powers of the Lieutenant Governor, what is the powers of the NCT of Delhi, and all that. So the Supreme Court held very interestingly. It was a Constitution Bench judgment. I can give you a citation. It's 2018 8 Supreme Court cases, 501. But there, the court brings in the principle saying it's the duty of the court, by virtue of the principle of constitutional morality, to balance between idealism and pragmatism. See, this is the balancing which has to be done. This is done, according to the Supreme Court, based on the principles of constitutional morality. And instinctively they decided that if you recollect, some of you must have read that judgment, it's very interesting that they have then gone on what the principles of democracy and how the powers have to balance between the LG and what is the issue of the how far he is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, etc. So in doing that, then they restricted that the LG will only be having the power of land and police, etc. And the rest of the power of, he can't interfere in the day-to-day functioning of the government, etc. This is what they had had. Now, another principle of this constitutional morality creeping in is in the principles of purposive interpretation. Now, this is based on constitutional morality, purposive interpretation. Why? Because if you find that the interpretation is not cut and dry, clear, and there is a gray area in the interpretation, then you have to go on the purposive interpretation. What was the purpose? Now, purpose cannot be alien to constitutional morality. Please remember that. No purpose of an enactment, whether it is the constitutional challenge to a constitutional provision also. Constitutional provisions have also been challenged as opposed to the basic structure of the Constitution. And also any other statutory enactment which have to be interpreted. You see, what is the purpose? What was the purpose for it? And that purpose is controlled. You can't have an immoral purpose. There is no such concept of constitutional immorality. There is only constitutional morality. Now, you become immoral towards the Constitution when people holding constitutional offices forget their oath, which is an allegiance to the Constitution. Any violation of the oath, see, we don't have in this country a recourse if there is a violation of the oath. What is the violation of the oath? I wish this could become a part of the quo breach of quo warranto, that you cannot continue to occupy that constitutional post if you have violated your constitutional oath, the oath taken under the Constitution. If you have taken an oath to have allegiance to the Constitution, how can any action of yours could be in violation of that oath? And if that is so, then you have disentitled yourself to that post. Why? Because otherwise, before you occupy that post, you have to take that oath. Without taking an oath, you could not have occupied the oath of office. Therefore, if you violate a oath of office, then surely a writ of quo warranto should be applicable against you. And the constitutional courts should be, while upholding the principles of constitutional morality, direct that this person should vacate the office. That would be, that's my view. I don't know whether it has never been advocated or professed in this manner at all before that. But this is what I feel it ought to be. And there's another principle that we have in the Constitution is the principles of substantive equality, which is directed at eliminating individual prejudices, individual bias. Now, this is any principle of morality will show. First thing is that all people must be treated equally. Therefore, the Article 14, which talks about equal protection of laws and which has now been expanded a lot over the years now and made it very broadly applicable, it also is a step in that direction. And if you just see, if you remember the case where the provision regarding adultery, 497 of the IPC was challenged, and the Supreme Court struck it down. That is what they had said, that it is under the transformative power. There's Joseph Shine's case, Joseph Shine, that is reported in 2019. This transformative power of the Constitution and its constitutional validity is based on the principle of constitutional morality. Constitutional morality is something which must act as a beacon for and a guiding light for all people holding constitutional posts and even for the administrative bureaucracy, administrative officers to see what is the principles of constitutional morality. You can't say that it could only be confined to constitution. If it's a constitutional morality, then it is applicable in the entire canvas of this country. You can't restrict it only to the written constitution and nowhere else at all. Even in the day-to-day administrative law functioning, the principles of constitutional morality must be applied. And if they are done so, then I can show you the litigation in the constitutional courts in which 70% of the litigation is confined to the government as a party would surely receive if they begin to follow the principles of constitutional morality. They should be, constitutional morality must now, according to me, should be a major subject of teaching in all law institutions. I don't know. Professor Tiwari would probably be able to tell whether we have a curriculum of this or not. I am not aware of constitutional morality as a subject, so that it is instilled in the in the students of law, instilled from that time, at least from the judiciary point of view. And this, I would feel that constitutional morality must also be a part of any administrative training given to any administrative officers, so that you inculcate in them a respect for the Constitution. You inculcate in them idealism vis-a-vis the Constitution. What is an ideal Constitution? You have to inculcate that right from the beginning. This could be, that is why our suggestion is, we could also write, I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, because the decision of the political class is very different and their approach is very different. So we don't know whether it will strike a chord with them or not. Then if you see another very important case of the Supreme Court was in this Manoj Narula's case. The Constitution Bench, while discussing Article 75(1) and 164(1) of the Constitution, they laying down the parameters, what are the duties cast upon the Prime Minister and the Chief Minister, while providing advice to the Governor for appointment of a MLA or an MP as a minister. So there they say, based on constitutional morality, because a person, they say, even if he's charged with a serious offense of he's having a murder or rape or things like that, therefore that person should be avoided. He used the word avoided because the Constitution was that they are not guilty as yet. The argument was before the court that they are not guilty. He said they may not be guilty, but they have been charged. So, applying the principles of constitutional morality, it would not be moral to include them in the cabinet until they are clear of those charges. That is the principle that the court said. And they also said that if the person is charged for having any offense of moral turpitude, then also the same principles must apply. Because why? Then, if you remember, in Jayalalitha's case, she was not an elected member. She became the chief minister without being elected. And after expiry of the period of 6 months, after a gap of one day, she was again elected. Therefore, on this there is no such prohibition in the Constitution. Constitution mainly says a person who is not a member of the House can be a minister for 6 months. But within that period, he has to get elected or vacate his office. So in this very case, they have said that you cannot be allowed to have a repetitive occupation of the minister's post, although you are still not elected. That means if that would have been permitted, because there is no such bar in the Constitution. And this principles of constitutional morality was brought in and taken aid of, and Supreme Court said, sorry, no, and Jayalalitha had to vacate her office. And even in this Constitution Bench judgment, that has been decided that you cannot bypass the Constitution because the spirit of the Constitution will be violated. The very spirit of it. Now, anything which is not constitutional, outside the scope of constitutional morality, will be violating the very spirit of the Constitution. That's why I say not only in letter, but the Constitution has to be followed in spirit. Then you say spirit, that means it's not something which is provided. But then there are sufficient indications in our constitutional provisions to show what is wrong and what is right. That is, which is moral and which is immoral. What is good behavior, what is bad behavior. What is moral behavior, what is immoral behavior. Within that, they said, sorry, embargo of 6 months. You can't be repetitive, backed by the Constitution. Now just see a principle, I'm just going to cite, recently we've been having this, the Rajasthan imbroglio and others. All this is something, what would you call that? If a constitutional functionary wants to ignore a law laid down by the Supreme Court, and any decision of the Supreme Court is law under Article 141 of the Constitution, what happens? This brazen or blatant or whatever it is, anybody, I'm not giving any specific example, but it was like in 1992 in Holahan case. You know? It was decided by the Constitution Bench of the Supreme Court. A lot of parameters were there. They have decided what can be done, what cannot be done. Then in the recent Nemam Radia's case, the Supreme Court had decided that while interpreting Article 174(1) of the Constitution, while sounding of the Assembly is concerned, he said as long as the government is in majority and functioning, then any call for an assembly session or recommendation to the governor to summon an assembly session is binding on the government. There is no discretion of his at all. Unless the governor feels there is not the party which is in the government which was in power that has fallen short of majority. Only then. But that was on the other way around. That government which had fallen short of majority wanted the governor to prorogue the assembly. And governor refused to prorogue. In that case, the Supreme Court said, yes, you can't. But as far as summoning is concerned, nothing can be a rider of this nature to leave a discretion or an elbow room to the governor. Because that fouls of, it runs foul to the principles of democracy, our constitution. Aid and advice of the Prime Minister, we are binding under the Constitution. And yet it requires, just see how it is, that every time it is the Supreme Court which has to decide as though the constitutional law is not clear. It is clear, but it is bypassed by all. And that is why our constitutional courts are there to ensure that the Constitution is followed. And anything, any aberration in that regard, of course, has to be struck down. Now, if in that vein itself, the Supreme Court said that tremendous amount of constitutional trust has been reposed on the Prime Minister and the Chief Minister. What they meant, of course, to include all constitutional functionaries. And therefore, the court, which acts as a conscience of the Constitution, must interfere if there is a breach of constitutional morality. There can never be a situation where you say, no, it's constitutionally immoral, but under the enacting provisions of the Constitution, it's permissible. It can't be. Simply it can't be. Because the moment it is immoral, something constitutional is immoral, it would clearly go or violate our preamble. And that is the basic requirement of the preamble letter, how the constitution should be, how the constitution should function, what is the scope of the constitution. It provides that. It provides the guiding light to the constitution. All enacting provisions which have been framed have to keep the preamble in mind before they frame. Can they frame? Can an enacting provision say, when the preamble says secure justice, social, economic and political, can the enacting provision bypass this? No. Then if the preamble says liberty of thought, expression, belief and faith and worship, then freedom of expression comes under that. Article 25 to 30 as far as religion is concerned comes under that. And they under Article 19 the expression. But here the word is thought. Very important is why is the word thought there. Now thought, when you think, you can always in your thinking be immoral or moral. That's why it's purely within the realm of morality, what you are thinking. So now if you think, your thought is put into expression. That's why the word is liberty of thought followed by expression. Then belief, then faith, and then worship. Without the thought of a proper thought, a good thought, a right thought, not a wrong thought, which of course within the realm of moral or immoral, how can the expression be otherwise? Can an expression be otherwise? Then what your thought is? That's why it lays down the Constitution itself says so. Constitution framers were very well aware that how constitutional morality should play a very important and a pivotal role in not only the function of the Constitution but also its interpretation. Then equality of status and opportunity. Again, don't take away the word thought from that. If you provide an equality of status and opportunity, and if you do not, forget the Constitution, even normally, immorally, is it not said that all people are equal? Every religion says so or not? Every religion says, chahe raja ho ya rang, it doesn't matter. Everybody is equal. Na rang mein koi bhed hona chahiye. Yes, so our ancient philosophy is Indian philosophy. It's all based on morality, and that is how it has been imbibed in the Constitution. All these principles, if you go deeply into it, each principle has a philosophy behind it. Each word of your preamble has a philosophy behind it. And this philosophy emanates from constitutional morality. Becomes constitutional because it's provided in the Constitution. But basically there has to be principles of morality before it becoming a constitutional morality. You can't say you have morality but no constitutional morality. That is the unacceptable position. That is why it's very day we are seeing every day that efforts are being made, not only from now, from time immemorial. Efforts will always be made. Because the political class has its own agenda and own objective. We have nothing against that. Each political party has its own way of thinking. Fine. But who are the conscience keepers? Who are the conscience keepers? In the framework of our constitution, it is the constitutional court, which are the keepers of the constitution, conscience of the constitution. That's what even Supreme Court says so. So now, it is their duty to ensure that every action of the executive is propelled only on principles, is brought into act only based on the principles of constitutional morality. Sanjay, I hope, what is the time limit that I should speak? I hope I have not crossed it.
About 30 minutes.
How much of time is left for you? Because I said Dr. Tiwari also, I can't accommodate the entire time.
Yes, Professor also to speak on the subject, sir.
So is it all right that I've spoken at least about 30 minutes now?
You can carry on, sir, please.
No. But Mr. Dr. Tiwari also has to speak. It's not fair.
We are as a host today. We wish to listen to you.
Today, Dr. Chaimandya Tripathi is the host. I am the co-host, and another speaker is Dr. A.K. Pandey.
Oh.
You can carry on, sir. You can carry on.
To refer to some portions, I'll read some portions from Dr. Chandrachud, Justice Chandrachud's observations of what he held in Joseph Schein's case. Very interesting reading. They are dealing with section 497, and it comes into the immoral part of it. So, adultery is immoral, it's all right. That is the societal concept. But when it comes to enactment in a statute, and then they say that section 497 amounts to denial of substantive equality. Now, I just read substantive equality of this is contained in our preamble and also under Article 14. The equality principle is from Article 14, right? And also Article 14 is because what the preamble says. That was the enacting provision. The preamble was giving them a push towards enacting and towards the enacting provision. And they say, espouse the notion of equality, which is contrary to the constitutional vision of just social order. Justness postulates equality. Now, you just pause here for a moment. Very interesting. How do you bring in morality? Forget the word constitution. Is it not moral for any one of us to have a vision for just social order? Is it not moral to have a just social order? It is. Is it not that justness, which is a good thing, which is a facet of morality? Justness is a facet of morality. Now that facet postulates what? It postulates equality. And then the court says, in consonance with constitutional morality, I'm reading paragraph 171, substantive equality is directing at eliminating individual, institutional, and systemic discrimination. Against what? Disadvantaged groups, which effectively undermine their full and equal social, economic, political, and cultural participation to the society. Go back to the preamble. The preamble provides just for this. Justice, social, economic, and political. So interesting, isn't it? And then this concept is taken from there by the Supreme Court while interpreting whether in article there is a discriminatory element in article in section 497 or not related to adultery. Now, further they say, the primary inquiry to be undertaken by the court towards the realization of substantive equality is to determine whether the provision contributes to the subordination of a disadvantaged group of individuals. Disadvantage must be addressed not by treating a woman as weak, but by construing her entitlement to equal citizenship. Our age-old philosophy is also the same. Give respect to a woman. हमारे यहाँ उसको संबोधित करते हैं देवी के रूप में, तो वो भी तो एक मॉरलिटी से ही निकला हुआ एक कॉन्सेप्ट है. और वही कॉन्सेप्ट फिर किसी स्टैट्यूट में आता है, और वो स्टैट्यूट को अगर if you want to challenge that, then how do you challenge it? You say it violates the constitutional morality principle which is imbibed in such and such provision of the law, and since it violates the constitutional law, then it must be struck down as ultra vires of the Constitution. The ultra vires merely means without authority. In the Latin translation of word ultra vires is ultra means without, and vires is authority. So provision can be ultra vires of a particular statute also. It can be ultra vires to the Constitution also. It's not necessary that ultra vires word, the principle of ultra vires applies only if you violate the Constitution. No. If a particular provision of or an order of an administrative authority is to be challenged to say it is ultra vires of the rules or the ultra vires of the service law, that also is an accepted principle. So, then he talks about the famous author Catherine MacKinnon, where they talked about personal and view the family as a crucible of woman's unequal status and subordinate treatment sexually, physically, economically, and civilly. Now, see, if you want to view a relationship of a family or a concept of a family, doesn't morality creep in? It creeps in. The relationship intra-family and relationship inter-family is definitely controlled by morality and moral principles. And if any society has to give a complete bygone to the moral principle, then all these laws, etc., will have no meaning at all. Then you have given a bygone to all such statutes or provisions and all that. The fulcrum of any societal behavior the point around which the society stands is morality. Take that away and it would have a tendency of bringing down everything like a pack of cards. Therefore, it's very, very important, and it has come to on the ground to understand the principles of constitutional morality, which will define every action of us. Every action of those in authority has to conform to, have to be in consonance to. Supreme Court says so. All this should be in consonance with the principles of morality. It should conform to the principles of constitutional morality. That means, if you read it the other way around, it must not violate the principles of constitutional morality. Any action which does so will be outside the scope of the Constitution and that's why invalid. In law, we are talking from the point of view of law, but then even our societal behavior, even our behavior towards each other, the principles of morality hold a great force. I think I should wind up. Thank you very much for calling me and giving me this time to share my views and thoughts.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for sparing time.
Sanjay,
I must thank you also, Sanjay, for sending me your citation so that I would have gone through it and prepared my case. And thank you to you also. And Pratiji, and thank you very much for conducting this in this manner. Anybody wants to ask any questions? Are you open for questions?
we will have the question answers after Professor A.K. Pandey delivers his speech, sir.
All right.
Right. But we won't say you thank you for a very good speaker, please.
Oh, thank you very much. So nice of you.
We'll be waiting for some more deliberation.
Feels nice when you appreciate it. Always nice.
Pleasure. Sanjay wants to go with two of the quotations, please. Sanjay, you can go ahead, please.
Yes. So, Mr. Chaudhary has elucidated the contours of today's discussion, and he has enlightened us about the various contours of constitutional morality. In this context itself, I would like to quote two great men, Dr. Rajendra Prasad and Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. What they said in the Constituent Assembly when the Constitution was being framed. And first, I would like to quote Dr. Rajendra Prasad. Dr. Rajendra Prasad said, and I quote, "If the elected people are capable and men of character and integrity, they would be able to make the best even of a defective constitution. If they are lacking in them, constitution cannot help this country. After all, a constitution like a machine is a lifeless thing. It requires life because of men who control it and operate it." Unquote. And Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, who is also called the architect of Indian Constitution, he also said, and that is completely on the same lines as Mr. Chaudhary has elucidated right now, and what he said, I am quoting, quote, "Constitutional morality is not a natural sentiment. It has to be cultivated. We must realize that our people have yet to learn it." So this is what Mr. Chaudhary was emphasizing, that not only constitutional morality be taught in the LLB curriculum, but in administrative programs also, the government servant should be sensitized and taught about this aspect. Over to you, Mr. Chairman Tripathi.
Thank you for very appropriate comments, Sir Sanjay. And on this note, I formally invite Professor A.K. Pandey sir, who is more of a guardian than my senior in my faculty. But I'm happy to invite for two reasons. First, there are many faculty of law students also who are joining this webinar, who are very afraid of it, but today they will find the academic gesture on this forum, sir. I welcome you, Professor Pandey sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Dr. Chairman Tripathi ji. I am thankful to Mr. Anup Chaudhary ji, who presented a nice lecture on this topic of topical importance. When this topic was chosen, perhaps it was in the mind of the organizers that the entire functionaries created by the Constitution, they are in a state of rift and confrontation. And therefore, there is a need to have discussion on this point. I should begin with the term, what do we mean usually or broadly about the constitutional morality? In fact, am I audible to all you, sir?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Sir, so far as constitutional morality is concerned, basically it is a sort of allegiance and reverence and faith in the Constitution, which each and every individual has to show, has to follow and practice. Fortunately, so far as Indian Constitution is concerned, the giver of this Constitution and recipient of this Constitution are the people of India. In that way, it is a nice document which may be called a political document, legal document, as well as moral document. And the preamble itself has created certain goals by which law can be helpful in achieving those goals. But the point is that why at this juncture we have started witnessing a sort of confrontation between various organs of the state as well as the interest of the individuals. If we start our journey taking help of Sir Henry Maine, then he says that the society has evolved. At one point of time, we were in a state of static society where custom in which morality was very much embedded, that was there. But with the society becoming a progressive one, we started having the rule of change, rule of education, and rule of recognition. Therefore, law was made when the codification comes and when we come to the legislation, then this particular things become quite manifest. So it is perhaps gives a wrong impression that we are talking about constitutional morality in recent time, starting from Naj Foundation case or like that in 2009. In fact, the question of constitutional morality in India started right from the beginning, when the legislation pertaining to land reform were initiated, and that was struck down by the Supreme Court of India, saying that it is in violation of fundamental right. At that very time, or since that very time, the confrontation between executive and judiciary started. And to tame judiciary to some extent, the amendments were brought. And particularly 9th schedule of the Constitution is the product of that confrontation. So this confrontation is not new. Now, so far as requirement of goal and requirement of means by which those goals will be provided, it is given very much in the Constitution itself. In recent past, maybe in 3 to 4 years, we have witnessed certain landmark cases, like Sabarimala case, like Puttu Swami case, Aadhaar case, Joseph Sain case, like that. But point is that why we have to resort to this? The reason is simple, that when the Hobbesian theory of state and law, it was there, then desire and will of the political superior, sovereign, that was taken into account. When critical legal studies developed or started taking shape in late 90s of 20th century, then at that point of time, it is being, from that point of time, it is being said that law is nothing but politics. Law has its own ideology, autonomous ideology, except the politics. So if politics has percolated in every field of life and law is being cornered, certainly there should be some institution which, and the Constitution of India itself says that Supreme Court of India is the protector of the Constitution, is the guardian of the fundamental right. So it has to take that reign. Ultimately, what happens? That the court started expanding its horizon. And Parliament, on the other hand, was doing the same thing. The result was seen in the case of Keshwanand Bharti, where the Supreme Court created the principle of basic feature. Though it did not use the term constitutional morality, but by basic feature doctrine, it tried to bring the Parliament within its limit, that you cannot trample all the fundamental rights in one go, depending upon the fact that you have got majority in the Parliament. Not like that. There is a prescribed boundary, there is a rule of law, there is separation of power. So different organs created under the Constitution, they have to function within the constitutional framework, and the purpose should be for the amelioration of the condition of the masses, for the people of this country. Now, if there is encroachment by any organ of the state over the function and the system of the other, then the Supreme Court has to come into picture. So we may call it judicial overreach, we may call it judicial activism, whatsoever it be. Now the question is that should we bring element of morality in it or not? If we go by positivistic approach to law, they will say that morality is something alien to law and we should not take into account. But in fact, it is the time when we have to strike a balance, we have to blend the positivistic law as well as naturalistic law. And some element of morality, which is not alien to our constitution, which is not alien to our system, which could not take the forefront or the front seat, because of the fact that the time when constitution was made, at that time people never thought that there will be a time to come in which people will forget the basic tenets of their life, their behavior, their behavioral pattern. So, but at this point of time, we are at a crossroad where judiciary is finding problem for its own existence, parliament having its own problem, and executive is having own. And therefore, they, for their survival, which is only an apprehension, I feel, personally I feel that it is only an apprehension, that they are trying to do something which has never been foreseen or anticipated by our four founders, constitution makers. Now the question is that if we start bringing element of constitutional morality, then from which particular place we get this idea that we should bring it? Number one. Number two, that if we bring it, what will be its consequences? What will be advantages? And what are the fallouts? What are the disadvantages of this? So far as the constitutional morality is concerned, that morality comes from the preamble itself, no doubt about it. But there are other parts in the constitution, like part 2 of the constitution, part 4 of the constitution, and part 4a, dealing with fundamental rights, directive principle of state policy, as well as fundamental duties. One should not be only careful and cautious only about the fundamental right, but he should also talk about the fundamental duties. And state, on the other hand, it is not concerned with its own formation in one state or the other, or at the central level, but it has to take into account directive principle of state policy, and it will be fundamental principle of governance. If the government, be at center or be it at state level, it is forgetting its fundamental principle of governance. So who else will bring them at the path? So here the role of judiciary becomes very much apparent. So what the constitution itself creates space for morality, but the question of morality arises when there is a silence as to the particular point. If the statute is very clear, then that should be taken into account. But at the same time, the interpretation should not be in such a way that we restrict ourselves only to the text, forgetting about the soul. Text and soul should be synchronized in such a way that people of this country ultimately grow and develop. This is to be learned over a period of time. It is not a matter of day or two. It should be a part and parcel of our training in every sphere. It may be at my home. It may be my faculty institute. Sorry, it may be in my faculty institution. Everywhere. Now the question is, if the constitutional morality is resorted to by the Supreme Court of India while giving interpretation to any part of the constitution or any article of the constitution, what is gain which is likely to take place? The first and foremost thing is that constitution for us is a fundamental document which should be guarded, which should be protected, preserved, very honestly. So the institutions created by the constitution, they will be saved, number one. Number two, rule of law, that will be secured. Every person, every institution will act according to rule, not by rule of man. Then thirdly, that if we go by constitutional morality, then there will be a sense of self-restraint developed in every organ of the state. So it is earlier, morality used to keep within the limits every individual out of his own conscience. But now we have given that conscience which is reflected in the constitution itself. If we say that there is a concept of justice, social, economic, and political. So if there is no justice, social, political, or economic, and the state is not coming forward, then who will take the responsibility to ensure it? Certainly the judiciary has to come forward. And we cannot say that judiciary should not come because there is no provision, or the state, as it wants to do something, it is free to do. Not like that. The second important aspect, which is to be taken care of, is that when we talk about constitutional morality, it reflects the morality which is congealed in our society, which is the society is the repository of the customs, ethics, morality, and that is reflected in the constitution. And this morality is to be reflected through the constitution, and it will percolate down to the society. So it will start its journey from the top to bottom, or you can say that it will percolate from top to bottom. For a time being, it may appear that organic evolution of morality is being affected. But if there is no element of morality, then certainly one should come forward, and the Supreme Court has taken that thing. Now, another important aspect is that if the Supreme Court, or for the judiciary as such, is taking that thing into account, then apprehension has been expressed by one senior member of the Supreme Court bar that it will create third chamber in the parliament. It will usurp all the power of the parliament. But I have my own reservation that if the parliament is not functioning, if the executive is not within its limit, then who else should come forward? So Supreme Court acts as a safety wall. As and when there is mounting pressure, through this safety wall, the pressure should be released. So this apprehension that it will become third chamber, which at one point of time Jawaharlal Nehru had expressed that we do not want that the parliamentary democracy should be replaced by judicial democracy. In fact, I don't think that is likely to come in near future. The second apprehension is that if the constitutional morality is being emphasized, then it will be difficult for the parliament as well as other elements, because it brings element of subjectivity in it. If subjectivity comes, then one judge may say that constitutional morality should be brought, another may say that it is not. But sometimes subjectivity may also be good for the system to sustain the society. So my emphasis would be that while constitutional morality is desirable, and at the same time, if the limit is crossed by the Supreme Court or the court at any point of time, certainly it should also be brought within its ambit. My point of submission is that this impression that constitutional morality has gained its impetus, or it has become popular since 2017 or 18. In fact, it is not like that. It started right from the day we started with our constitution, and the confrontation between various organs that came in forefront, and judiciary came to rescue and maintain the limits of various organs. Now, point is that if the state is having its own apprehension that it will be vanished because of militancy, because of war, because of activities like that, or insurgency, the state is having that fear. Judiciary is having fear that contempt is the only weapon in the hand of the judiciary by which it can maintain its dignity, and the parliament is of the opinion that my realm of affairs is being eclipsed by someone else. Now, if we are asking about that, particularly with reference to Rajasthan case, that when we brought 10th schedule, the purpose was that there should be, this 10th schedule is also the product of morality, constitutional morality. That a person who has been chosen on a particular seat, by a particular party or by a particular seat, and people have voted for it, he should not change his allegiance. Of course, there are certain exceptions. And if he does so, then he may be declared disqualified. Now, here the disqualification, declaration of disqualification is by the speaker. The speaker happens to be the final authority to decide whether a person has become disqualified or he is very much qualified. And if someone else interferes in that, certainly there is a encroachment upon it. So how the different organs, they should work, they should coordinate with each other. That is the fundamental thing. People, and particularly representative of the people, they take oath of the Constitution. But after having that formality, they forget about the provisions of the Constitution and they become selective. So freedom of religion, freedom of equality, or freedom of speech and expression, justice, fraternity, all these things are the constitutional goals which are to be achieved through the mechanism of the state, and the state should further these goals to be achieved in future, but it is not a matter of a day or two. It is to be inculcated in the habit of all the citizens, and citizen, for my purpose of this discussion, citizen includes even if a person has been elected and he has come to power, or he is ordinary citizen like us. We have to show our faith, allegiance, and reverence in the Constitution of India. And constitutional morality is nothing new which came up before the Supreme Court in 2017, 18 or 19. So with this, I would like to thank all of you that you have given me a patient hearing on this. And particularly, I am thankful to Mr. Anup G. Chaudhary, who joined us this afternoon. And I am thankful to Professor Tripathi for giving me the opportunity to share some of my views on this particular point. Thank you very much. Over to Sanjay Pathak.
Sanjay, you take up your brief, then I'll come on the other side.
Yes, yes. So, Professor Pandey, thank you so much for giving a different perspective of the subject of the day, that is constitutional morality. And you have very rightly made a distinction between morality in general and the constitutional morality. And we have got your point very well. And thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us in a different manner on the subject. And as I could gather from your thought process, sir, the spirit of constitutional morality negates the idea of concentration of power in the hands of a few. And this is what Supreme Court has written in one of the judgments. And you have echoed the same sentiments, sir. And constitutional morality provides a basic rule which prevents the institutions from turning tyrannical. This is again one of the quotes from the Supreme Court, sir, Justice Chandrachud. And another professor has very beautifully written, without some infusion of constitutional morality amongst the judges, legislators, lawyers, ministers, civil servants, writers, etc., the Constitution becomes a plaything of power brokers. And sir, you have rightly mentioned, unless the functional and executive and legislative and judicial arena is tinged with a color of morality, particularly constitutional morality, we won't be able to secure the objectives of the Constitution. In the beginning, I had already quoted Dr. Ambedkar, who had specifically used this term constitutional morality. So, sir, thank you so much for enlightening us. And now over to Dr. Kshemendra Tripathi.
Any of the members who were joined in the meeting, आप में से कोई भी कोई सवाल पूछना चाहे, please? जो भी सवाल पूछना चाहें आप या तो अपने चैट में आप प्लीज डाल दें, या एक एक करके आप अपने आप को अनम्यूट करके आप सवाल पूछ लें। डॉक्टर आनंद प्रकाश तिवारी हमारे फाउंडेशन के सीनियर मेंबर हैं, तो मैं आप ही से मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा सर, अगर आप कोई सवाल पूछना चाहें प्लीज।
हेलो
जी सर, आपकी आवाज आ रही है।
मैं कह रहे थे कि पार्लियामेंटन जो मोरालिटी है, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी, आज तो उसकी एकदम से खत भिजवा के लोगों ने रख दिया है। एक समय था कि जो हमारा मुख्यमंत्री होता था या हमारा प्रधानमंत्री होता था, उसको लोकप्रिय सदन का सदस्य होना जरूरी था। बाद में उसको इन लोगों ने ऐसा किया कि लोकप्रिय सदन को क्या कहते हैं, उच्च सदन से अपना आना शुरू किए। खास करके मनमोहन जी की बात करें या मायावती जी की बात करें या वो तमिलनाडु की उनकी बात करें, और आज तो ये हमारा पार्लियामेंट ये जो है ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन यहाँ तक पहुंच गया है कि
सर अपना सवाल पूछिए सर।
हम सवाल ये पूछते हैं कि यह जो हमारा पार्लियामेंट्री अथॉरिटी का जो क्षरण हो रहा है, यह कहाँ जाकर रुकेगा? आज की तारीख में तो अपोजिशन के ही मेंबर को हटा करके और उसकी जगह किसी तरीके से हमारा मुख्यमंत्री अपना चुनाव करा ले रहा है। आखिर ये हमारी मोरालिटी अब कहाँ जाकर के रुकेगी? क्या उस पर कुछ प्रकाश डालें?
ऐसा है, देखिए आजकल पूरी बाजार में मंदी चल रही है, इकोनॉमिक स्लो डाउन है, पर ये जो एमएलए का खरीद फरोख्त का जो बाजार है, इसमें बहुत गर्मी।
जी 5-5 करोड़ की बिक रहे हैं।
हाँ, बहुत गर्मी है, कहीं लगता नहीं है। इसका जो स्टॉक मार्केट है ना, एकदम ऊपर जा रहा है, 50,000 को भी क्रॉस कर गया होगा।
कहीं गुंजाइश है?
30-35 करोड़ रुपए खर्च करके आदमी इलेक्शन जीतता है, तो पार्टी कहे भाई हम काहे को अपने कैंडिडेट को देंगे, जो भी जीतेगा उसको 10 करोड़ में खरीद लेंगे। ये भी एक तरीका हो गया ना। नॉर्थ ईस्ट की गवर्नमेंटें बनी हैं, सब ऐसे ही हुए हैं, सब एक पार्टी से हटके दूसरी पार्टी आ गई। एक एमएलए जिस पार्टी का था उसके पास अब 16 एमएलए हो गए, क्योंकि वो सारे के सारे जॉब के 5 चले गए। अब ये तो क्या कहें इसको, बताइए। और हमारे सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने, अभी बता दूं मैं आपको, इस मामले में पूछा है तो एक अभी इंस्टेंस आया था कर्नाटक असेंबली का, उसमें जो डिस्क्वालिफाइड एमएलए थे, पहले इसके डिस्क्वालिफाइड एमएलए को उस टर्म में इलेक्शन की का राइट नहीं था लड़ने का। They could not contest during their term because they were elected for term of 5 years. तो उस टर्म में there was no chance for them to recontest. अब आप साथ या सुप्रीम कोर्ट की हमारी बेंच ने कह दिया कि नहीं, यू कैन रिकंटेस्ट। वो एक बैरियर था जो हट गया, नहीं तो लोग आते नहीं थे पार्टी में। आप डिस्क्वालीफाई हो गए तो डिस्क्वालीफाई होने के बाद आप फिर रिकंटेस्ट कर सकते हैं। अब उसमें क्या हुआ कि 5 साल की टर्म हुई। आज हम एक पार्टी ए में हैं, उसके सिंबल पे हम इलेक्ट हो गया है। 6 महीने बाद जो भी दूसरी पार्टी ने हमको इंसेंटिव प्रोवाइड किया तो हम वहां चले गए। अब साहब 8-10 लोग वहां चले गए, वो पार्टी की गवर्नमेंट बन गई, ये पार्टी की गवर्नमेंट गिन गई। विदिन 3 मंथ्स उनको वो लोग डिस्क्वालिफाइड एमएलए को वापस कंटेस्ट करने का राइट है, फिर कंटेस्ट कर लिया, फिर जीत के पार्टी बी के सिंबल पे आ गए। और इस व्यक्ति के पास 10 एमएलए हैं जो इसको फॉलो करते हैं हर तरफ। अब 6 महीने के बाद, साल भर के बाद फिर इनको तकलीफ हो गई उस पार्टी से, तो ये पार्टी में चले आए वापस। फिर ये डिस्क्वालीफाई हो गए क्योंकि वो स्पीकर उनका है। अब डिस्क्वालीफाई तो हो गए, तो इस पार्टी ने इंसेंटिव दिया तो इधर चले आए, अब डबल इंसेंटिव हो गया। अब फिर लड़े, फिर जीत गए। साल भर बाद फिर उन्होंने रिपीट करा। ये पॉसिबल है, देखिए ऐसा है। When you have to see the test on the ground of the arbitrariness of a particular thing, then you have to stretch the example to a limit which is possible. And hypothetically and legally, if the Honorable Supreme Court judgment has to be understood and followed, it means carte blanche. The biggest assault on the law of anti-defection was done by the Supreme Court in this judgment. They have really torn it to shreds, giving them such free. Now people have they are not afraid of crossing the floor. Because you cross the floor, you are disqualified, but you can contest again after 3 months. That disqualification for contesting during the tenure for which you are elected is the fundamental principle of anti-defection law. Otherwise, you are elected for what? You are elected for a term of 5 years. That's how the voters have voted you. They repose confidence in you for 5 years term. So if you reach the voters' confidence and you cross the floor, you can, and you are disqualified for that. You must not be allowed to contest during the term for which you were elected. Simple. अब ये देखिए, बीजेपी के टाइम पे ये लॉ बदलेगा नहीं था, यहाँ इसलिए बेफिक्र रही है, क्योंकि this has become a source of power to many parties. अब सब तरफ यही शुरू हो जाएगा, तो this will become not political morality हो जाएगा. It has now become a political morality. It's no longer immoral now. Morality. It happened in Goa. It happened in all the northeastern states. 75% of the MLAs and BJP governments everywhere, it's not their own at all. They are all congressmen who have crossed over. अभी भी चल रहा है. मध्य प्रदेश में 2 MLAs ने फिर रिजाइन करके बीजेपी ज्वाइन कर दिया, कांग्रेस के MLAs ने. तो बाजार गर्म है और चल रहा है. क्या करोगे? जैसे गहलोत साहब ने कहा कि साहब ये रेट बढ़ गए हैं, जरा जहां इलेक्शन अनाउंस हुआ है सही, अब तो बिल्कुल नॉर्थवर्ड जा रहा है शेयर मार्केट, साउथवर्ड के बजाय.
सर एक सवाल त्रिपुरा यूनिवर्सिटी से आ रहा है.
हाँ बताइए.
त्रिपुरा यूनिवर्सिटी से अरिजीत चक्रवर्ती का सवाल है
जी
कि आर्म्ड फोर्सेज स्पेशल प्रोटेक्शन एक्ट क्या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी के तहत इस तरह का कानून परमिट होना चाहिए?
कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोरालिटी के तहत तो नहीं, पर देखिए आजकल क्या है, हर गवर्नमेंट नेशनल सिक्योरिटी के नाम पे तो कुछ भी कर लेती है. आप नेशनल सिक्योरिटी लगाइए तो साहब हमें बड़े दूर भी रहने लगे आजकल हमारी सुप्रीम कोर्ट इन सब बातों से. भाई हाँ हम नहीं कहेंगे, हम नहीं कहेंगे नेशनल सिक्योरिटी. अब ये बात पूछे कि आप साहब के रहने से क्या सिक्योरिटी बनती रहती है? अभी आज 3 CRPF के लोगों को मिलिटेंट्स ने मार दिया था नॉर्थ ईस्ट में. अभी वो बंद थोड़ी होता है. सिर्फ ये है कि जो आर्म फोर्सेस का वहां पे जो अत्याचार होता है वो अनअबेटेड हो जाता है. And then it becomes like, every war in the world, conqueror has known when to take this as a trophy, all that they want to do, whoever they conquer. ये है ना, शुरू से रहा है. हिस्ट्री में आप देख लीजिए, शुरू से रहा है कि जो कॉन्कर करता था उसका सारा वो पूरा, किसी के राइट्स नहीं रहते थे, कुछ नहीं रहते थे, किसी ने अपोज किया उसको पहले स्लॉटर कर दिया. तो अभी भी स्लॉटर है, पहले तलवार से होता था, बंदूक से हो रहा है. दिस इज व्हाट ह्यूमन साइकोलॉजी इज. ट्राइब से हुआ था, रजवाड़े जो बने ट्राइब की तो एक्सटेंडेड फॉर्म है ना. एक कबीला था, हमने कहा साहब ठीक है 100-200 का कबीला है, उसने बाजू वाले के ऊपर हमला किया. तो देन देयर इज द क्वेश्चन ऑफ द सेम थिंग. एंड नाउ व्हेन occupation forces as such should not, the forces there begin to think like occupation forces. The psychology of occupation forces there, if those people were there in control, because you are killing signal. It is not said that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. तब आप किसी को absolute power है ऐसा, जब एब्सोल्यूट पावर हो गया तो फिर तो इंसान फितरत तो आएगी आगे आगे. ह्यूमन साइकोलॉजी इज you should give you total power. पुराने जमाने से आप देख लीजिएगा, कहीं भी देखिए, जिसके पास अधिक पावर है उसने पावर का मिसयूज करना शुरू कर दिया. और ये हमारी ह्यूमन फ्रेलिटी है. और फिर आजकल तो कलयुग है, तो फिर तो और भी फ्रेलिटी बढ़ गई है. कैसे उसको आप दूर कर सकते?
थैंक यू सर. पांडे सर, एक क्वेश्चन है फ्रॉम मिस्टर गौरव सिंह.
May I add to the?
Yes sir, please sir. Yes sir, please. आप अपना अनम्यूट कर ले पांडे सर.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
First thing is that should I add something which Mr. Anup Chaudhary ji has added
Yes,
in
sir,
response
please.
to that point?
Yes sir, please.
My point is that if we see the preamble of the Constitution, the word is fraternity, and there you will find two important things: individual dignity and national security. Problem is that we are not balancing those two, individual dignity and national security. National security has taken a dominating seat, and because of that we do not treat people as citizens of this country, rather they have become subject of this country or this particular power. So whether we want to make them subject or we want to make them citizen, we want to confer certain rights with respect to the state, that is to be taken into account, and we are unnecessarily having an apprehension that the state is at the verge of disintegration, as if though the government is in power overwhelmingly. So this I wanted to add, sir, that we are ignoring the concept of citizenship. The concept of citizenship is under tremendous stress and strain, and that is to be restored. Thank you. Over to Mr. Tripathi.
Sir,
what you can say, Janani of the IPS and the IAS system is the same bureaucracy. They function the same way. They are unanswerable to anybody. The netas have to get elected every 5 years. They can be discarded by the voter. That is to show. But what is they have immunity till the end. Show me one IAS officer where action has been taken. Ever. Well, नेता तो चले गए जेल में. परसेंटेज देख लीजिए IAS ऑफिसर्स की कहीं होता है. Accountability nahi hai, bilkul nahi. Nothing, absolutely nothing. And these governors, they're wasting public money. Or just see wherever it is happening. It is an anathema to democracy. Can it happen that a elected body is directly in the control of an appointed person who acts as an extended part of the body of the party to whom he belongs? How do you do that? That's the whole thing. And this is a violation of constitutional morality. Totally. But yet we are carrying on. Because it serves everybody's purpose. That's how it is.
So, thank you so much. One or two small questions are there.
Okay.
Any office bearer, this is by Mr. Shashank Shukla, is a law student in BHU. If any office bearer, if he does not,
office bearer.
If an office bearer, I think he is referring to a constitutional post. If any other member of parliament, I suppose this is where he is referring to his question, I think, quote unquote. If he violates the oath of his office, then by which law he should be removed?
No, I agree. I said it in my speech. That
Yes.
why can't he become up? I agree with you. I agree. He can be removed. We should make it try to make it an example, Dr. Tripathi. Because quantum is what? That you are disqualified to occupy the post you are occupying. So if you violate an oath, must think of challenging this at this point sometime. We must.
There is
violate constitutional oath. Gone. You can't hold a constitutional office.
right, sir. So there is one observation by Mr. Anand Kashyap. He is a practicing advocate in Bihar.
Okay.
He is also fortunately an alumni student of BHU. This is a morality point on the Supreme Court. What he's asking, that if the matters of in the name of urgency, like Mr. Arnab Goswami can be disposed by the Supreme Court, then why is it not happening in other cases? Is there not a failure of morality?
No, it affects, definitely. It's against the basic principle of constitutional morality. Why? Because the equal protection of laws and equality, what does they say? Justice is social, economic and political, and equality of status and opportunity. This violates the preamble of the Constitution.
There is one observation by Mr. Ratan Majumdar, I think he is from West Bengal, that the police torture during the lockdown period is constitutional morality. It is his observation actually, it's not a question. During lockdown, brutality caused by the police, is it not a violation of constitutional morality? This is his observation.
Absolutely. During lockdown, again, if you can compare this lockdown and the police there, compare it with ASPA. Total power. Do what you want to. Moment you do that, our police is geared to come out and show that there is an oppression. This is a form of that. It is definitely constitutionally immoral. It suffers from constitutional immorality. Anything wrong, because after all, the law and order is an offshoot of the Constitution. Protection of laws have been given to you under the Constitution. You are employed. But 188.
Yes, sir, please carry on, sir.
188, in which this fellow, that doesn't apply. That applies only to a violation of a prohibition. It does not can provide a direction to do something. Now they said this particular, what is this app which has come? Ayush app or whatever app that is. Arogya Setu. Kiska Arogya, Kiska Setu. Setu is a bridge. How is it a bridge? And secondly, you cannot direct under section 188 to do something. You can prohibit. So if you have prohibited that the shop will not remain open after some time, then 188 is attracted. But you can't say, that means if you don't have a mobile phone, you can't have Arogya Setu. So does this mean that 188 they have power to say you must buy a smartphone? And after buying a smartphone, then under 188 the power is there. It's not. You read 188 of the IPC. And it also be said that now you download. So no direction can be given under 188 to do something. Of course, there can be an order prohibiting you from doing something. Then is the who's to tell whom about this? That's the today Patna Sushant Kumar 2 FIRs registered of the same offence. Now how many judgments are there from that Katachari or something, whatever it is in Supreme Court? You can't have 2 FIRs of the same offence. You can't have. First FIR is registered there. They've registered in Bihar also. Bihari police have also come there. Very good. Why? And this is all total power. See, there's something producers giving them for half an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Why? Supreme Court has clearly laid down that under section 306, there's an abetment to suicide. Very clear. Nothing amounts to this. But the law, because the power is absolute, do what you want to. And the courts, wrong. This is wrong for the courts. They are not performing their duties of control. They are the only succor. They are the only recourse to a citizen. But time and again, they faltered in giving protection to the citizen. All courts, from down to up. You take that 12, those two people who are murdered in Tamil Nadu, that duty magistrate from second floor saw that man lying dead. He said, yes, send him to jail. Judicial remand. What is this? Isn't it immoral? Totally. He's not even prepared to see. They don't even check. They won't even see. They just say this. And then that judicial magistrate by now should have been taken action against by the High Court. Why have you not done that? You can take cognizance of this fact that from the second floor this fellow has done it, suspend him, demote him, do whatever, or dismiss him. By the Supreme Court and the High Court of Madras, they've taken suo motu notice, but they have not taken any action against the judicial magistrate. If the judicial magistrate had refused to give a remand, they would have been alive.
Sir, there is a very interesting question from Rishabh Ranjan.
No, sorry, one person.
Rishabh Ranjan has a question. Is not constitutional morality a dangerous doctrine?
How can it be a dangerous doctrine? Because that is saying something good, is it dangerous? So that is asking that question. Because morality is something to do with good and the right and not the wrong. So how can something right be dangerous? How can something good be dangerous? So there's no question of the constitutional immorality principle being dangerous. Out of question. In fact, it prevents a situation, if you follow constitutional morality, it prevents a person from a situation from becoming dangerous. I would say the other way around.
So
in fact, this issue was raised by Mr. Tushar Mehta and K.K. Venugopal, who appeared on behalf of the government of India. And the government of India feels that these doctrines are very dangerous for the existing structure of the state.
You are right, sir.
Therefore,
because you see, when there is no morality, there is no constitution. Left to them, there will be no constitution left. Why have the constitution then?
So that's why I am
constitutional morality.
Right.
Your preamble is the same. It reflects the constitutional morality. And even the directive principles of state policy are also a reflection of the constitutional morality. Right. They don't have the constitution at all. Okay.
The point is, sir, misuse and abuse of power by any organ of the state or any functionary of the state, that amounts to violation of constitutional morality.
Absolutely.
And
Article 14, it has to be reasonable. Every action has to be reasonable. The moment you do this, Dr. Pandey, it's a violation of Article 14 because it becomes arbitrary. The moment it is arbitrary, it's violation of constitutional morality. Because these are all facets of constitutional morality. To do a particular act in a correct way, that is morality. If the Constitution provides that you have to be in this way regarding social justice, equality, etc., your opportunity towards or formation of association or speech and all that, it means that's morality imbibed in the Constitution.
thank you, sir. We are taking the last question from our new faculty member, Ms. Dolly Singh. She wishes to ask you a question, sir, please.
Yeah, most welcome.
Yes, Dolly, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible. Tell me, where are you from?
I'm from BH. Otherwise, I'm from Chandigarh, sir.
Achha, all right. Tell me what you want to ask.
Yes, sir. Very, very good afternoon, sir. To Anup sir and to Pandit sir also. It was a very beautiful discussion. I learned a lot. And so one question comes to my mind is, so can we say that constitutional morality also covers political morality and social morality?
Yes, of course it does. Why? Because politics is controlled by law.
Right.
Politics is controlled by law. How you get elected, there is a law. How you will continue in your post, political post, is a law. If constitution of the political party is recognized by the EC Election Commission under the People's Representation Act. That is a law.
It is a law.
Politics is also governed by law. There can be nothing. After all, what is law?
To govern the society. Right.
What the society feels is something which is done in a particular manner, in a correct manner, in a right manner. So politics can't be devoid of society and devoid of law.
Absolutely, agreed, sir. And moving to my request to the Pandey sir, sir stated that we should follow the top to bottom approach when it comes to the follow-up of the constitutional morality. If the constitutional morality in itself covers the social morality, institutional morality, and the political immorality, then shouldn't it be the bottom to top approach instead of top to bottom approach? If you can throw a light, sir.
Very good question, Dorothy. My point was that if we are talking about constitutional morality, so it is flowing from the Supreme Court of India down to the population or citizens. Usually, what happens? The morality comes from the society. It develops as a root sap process. It goes upward. Now, point is that there are many evils in our society, like dowry, like sati pratha, like and so on and so forth, which are ingrained in our public morality, but we may not accept it as per our constitutional morality. So at times, constitutional morality may come in conflict with the public morality. We are not governed by public morality. We are governed by the constitutional morality. It was the public morality that woman of a particular age group, because of her physiological condition, was denied entry in a particular temple of Sabrimala temple. But constitutional morality says that each and every person is equal before the court of law, is equal before law. Equal protection will be afforded. So always it is not possible to have to say that constitutional morality and public morality, they go in the same direction. At times they may be in diverse direction. So at that point of time, the court has to apply constitutional morality, which is embedded in our constitution. So far, the second thing is that how should it move? If the root is not properly functioning, there is nothing which prevents the shoot to support the root. So my point is that ordinarily morality should come from the society. Unfortunately, it is not, and therefore there is a need that people should be given training, including the legislators, including the parliamentarians.
Right.
And that was my point. I hope that I would have satisfied your query.
Perfectly, sir. You're perfectly satisfied, and it was really an enriching deliberation today. So it was a very grateful lecture, sir. Thank you so much to Anup sir also and Pandey sir also. Thank you, sir.
With the permission of Mr. Chaudhary and Mr. Pandey, may I supplement your viewpoint with a passage from the Supreme Court Constitution Bench judgment? What both of you have stated, that has some resonance in one passage from the Supreme Court judgment of NCT Delhi case, where Supreme Court has clearly stated constitutional morality is the fulcrum which acts as an essential check upon the high functionaries and citizens alike.
Which paragraph?
Paragraph number I will tell you, sir. Something like this. So it is categorically written. Then the passage further reads: the elected representatives must not have an ulterior motive for representing their constituents, and they should not misuse the popular mandate awarded to them by covertly transforming it into own rule. The inherent value of public accountability can never be brushed aside. It is all in the context of constitutional morality, and it supplements the view taken by Mr. Chaudhary and Dr. Pandey.
Yeah, you could send this passage to
Definitely.
Ranjan Gogoi to read this.
Yes.
Let me read it after retirement.
ठीक है सर.
It was very nice even better.
The interaction, so the interaction always has to be better because the speakers are better actually.
Yes. No. Even those who
No. I already said at the very outset that respect is not commanded, and it is something which is inbuilt actually, and the knowledge has no limitations. So I am proud and happy that Sanjay proposed Mr. Chaudhary, and I took Professor Pandey sir because whom I am listening as a student from last 30 years, and as a family part also, and I'm happy, and I hope my audiences, the way that they have asked the questions, if both the speakers and Sanjay also agree, and along with Dr. Anand Prakash Tiwari ji, I propose to keep some modification in the same series of the lecture next time also. Constitutional idealism versus constitutional morality. Because what I heard from the juristic point of view from Pandey sir and the practical experience of Sanjay Pathak and Learned Chaudhary sir, the idealism is what we expect and morality is very difficult to deliver. And it has always been an era of power because both Pandey sir and Chaudhary sir also reciprocated while answering the Armed Forces Special Power Act by using the word, are we addressing the citizens or are we addressing the subjects in fact. So if that subjective element to which as far as I have gone through with Constituent Assembly debates, the objective resolution what Pandit Nehru had advocated for, and I am a great fan of Pandit Nehru because Mr. B.R. Ambedkar comes in the...
ऐसा मत बोलिएगा, आप anti-national हो रहे हैं।
कम से कम हम अपने वेबिनार पे एंटी नेशनल होना मंजूर है सर।
और आपने कहा ना, सॉरी, लाइटर मोमेंट में आपने कहा डिफिकल्ट टू डिलीवर, मतलब कहने का है कि दैट्स सिमिलर टू द बेबी, इजी टू कंसीव बट डिफिकल्ट टू डिलीवर।
Exactly. What I was quoting from my late father only, Professor Haryan Nath Tripathi, in whose name I have kept this foundation.
अच्छा.
To Dr. Anand Prakash Tiwari ji, who has been his PhD student also. He used to tell me about the reference and the importance of Keshwanand judgment case, Bharti case. And what I heard from my father, and I was only 2 years when that judgment was delivered, because what I have learned from my father was this tussle of power between the judiciary and the executive will never end. And this is what the whole problem is. Now, he was asking you precisely was my also question to Pandey sir. Unless the doesn't come up, you don't expect the change will come from the top. Now, how the grassroots cover up, that's a challenge. And that was exactly the purpose of keeping this topic. Yes, it had some reference of the recent problems in Madhya Pradesh and currently in Rajasthan. That was one of the at the backdrop that was there. But the real problem which we are facing and observing 5 months, that the downtrodden, the common man is really facing a problem. And to whom should he ask about the remedy part? And ultimately, and especially what we see on the TV channels, when the migrants were returning back to their hometowns, that was a very sorry state of affairs. Where did morality gone? I mean, that was that. And since we are trained in Banaras Hindu University, there we talk of some ethics and morality. As a law student, we refer to Hart and Fuller controversy of law and morality. But in practice, when it comes to the power side, we are, of course, like Holland said while describing international law, vanishing point of jurisprudence. So we are in that problem, but if you all support all the speakers and the audience, we will, with some modification in the topic next time also. If you permit all, then constitutional idealism versus constitutional morality. If you all permit, then we can carry on. We will carry on with Siri sir and Pandey sir and Chaudhary sir. We will be disturbing you. Even if you don't accept to our ethics, then also we will be requesting you to please be on the webinars, because we we are missing this element of academic touch in all deliberations. To be honest, I as an organizer, I admit. And that's why I have taken this opportunity of inviting the senior people so that we learn from your experience also and from your knowledge. There are young men who are very fluent in English, but we want knowledge and experience both in our webinars. And I am satisfied, and I hope the questions which the participants have asked, that reflects they are also very satisfied. But please allow both the speakers to keep on bothering you in the near future also, please. Even if you don't allow, then I'll take the liberty of disturbing you. But I thank Sanjay, who always reciprocates to my expectations, please. And
so you can start following me and I'll start following you.
Thank you. And so the details of this webinar is been recorded, and by evening or tomorrow morning it will be displayed on H.N. Tripathi Foundation YouTube also. And of course we will be witnessing in tomorrow's newspapers also. But last of all, I thank you, sir, all of you who spared your time on behalf of the foundation and rest of the audience, please. I thank you all, sir, please, so much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.